This is going to be a video about positioning. This is going to be a video specifically about avoiding the Midmosh. Now, you might not know what the Midmosh is, or what is going on here. What the Midmosh is the tendency in Dominions for troops in large battles to pile up in a giant pile in mid, where a lot of troops are standing around doing nothing and getting hit with all sorts of shit. It's a pretty bad place to end up in, and generally you want to have your troops be doing useful things on the battlefield and not simply having a mosh and dying to evocations. It's also the reason why many Dominions players and many communities value evocations very highly, and why I think this is an overvaluation of evocations, because they are balancing around a gameplay scenario that you, as a scripter, should be trying very, very hard to avoid. So in this battle, I have set up two armies. One, the Vanarushian army, set up to avoid the Midmosh, and a Phlegron army set up to get caught in it. As a demonstration, not very realistic. So what we have on the Vanarushian side... Oh, and before I start this, I've also turned on the Lucid's casting AI mod, aka Buff Begone spray, because I want to show you the effect on evocations, and that mod heavily favors evocations. I don't want my mages going up and casting buffs. I want to show exactly how this affects evocations. So that mod is on. This is not normal mage behavior. This is Lucid's mod mage behavior. I have all these mages on generally one self buff, if they can do it, True Shot on the Airs, or a Earth Power or Fire Power to give them a little more oomph. The Russian Wizards are very weak mages, but we can make them F2s or E2s, and that makes them into an acceptable battle mage by gemming them up. By the way, if you get to know common technique or uncommon technique, but you can use a gem to cast a spell of one level higher than you are, as long as you do not spend more gems in total than paths you have. So we gem up to Phoenix Pyre to level 2, or Phoenix Power to level 2, and then we can cast Fire 2 spells, Fire 2 evocations. So they're all set up, buff, hold, advance, and spells to get their evocations off. What really matters here are the troops. We have a line on attack closest, sparse line on attack rear, and sparse line on attack rear. This could also be attack rear, honestly. So the reason why we have these sparse lines, these could also be split up, is because first of all, troops in line formation are naturally more spread to avoid the Midmosh, and attack rear is very, very important because attack rear is the one order where your targeting is preserved through contact with the enemy, generally. You might be able to get this by targeting specific things, like cavalry or archers, but generally speaking, one of the reasons why the Midmosh happens is because troops on attack closest, or undisciplined, or basic attack orders will simply walk forward and then start attacking towards the mid. So they will just triangle in and kind of create a lump in the center. Attack rear troops, even if they attack rear troops in lines specifically, even if they contact enemy formations, the troops on the flank will keep marching. So your line will hit the enemy, and then your troops on the flank will keep on marching, and they will actually execute a wraparound on the enemy. Some of them might even make it to the mage line, but that's not as important in this battle. Generally, competent players guard against it. But I want you to see the effect when those troops hit the flanks and then actually keep walking and wrap around instead of immediately collapsing towards the center and creating a mosh pit. So that's our gallant in this goofy example. and they are attacking into Phlegra, which is going to be our Goofus in this example. I think, yeah, I have everyone that needs to be here moving in here. Alright. So, this is an army that is deliberately deployed poorly to demonstrate. They are the Goofus, they the Goof Troop, but just showing we have a larger number of troops, generally better troops with the exception of the Chud Berserkers. Those Vanarushian troops are basically Indie Light Infantry, but they are just all on attack closest or undisciplined. The PD, we have PD here that will contribute, but they will also be on default behavior and tend towards the mid. All our units are going to be on attack closest and or undis, and they are all going to tend towards the mid. This is obviously bad. You would not constitute a real army in this way. In a real battle, you would have them spread out along the line, even if their orders were bad, and then there would be a kind of triangle or reverse triangle formation would result, where you would have more troops in the Midmosh and fewer on the flanks, which is what happens in normal battles. But this is to demonstrate the point, so we've given them intentionally bad scripting. The mages are doing the same thing as the other ones are, as the Vanarushians are. They're generally stronger mages, the Trophimos Sage, because they are guaranteed a double path. They cast one self buff, if they have one, that will affect their ability to cast magic. Hold, and then advance in spells. They are going to be casting evocations into the center. I've given this side's mages bodyguards, so that the attack rear troops don't simply end the battle by killing off the mage core, just to show the effects of the mid-mosh only, and not like, oh, well, they attacked reared and then killed all the mages, and then of course that resulted into a win. No. This is just going to be showing what happens when you have troops stuck in the mid, which the AI does this as well. They have gotten a little better with their formations and scattering them out, but they do tend to get stuck. Summon troops, a lot of your summons, undis, or just really the loose formations tend to get stuck in this too. So it can go pretty badly. So we have our battlefield, we have our lines and our mages. The Vanarushian first line on attack closest. Like I said, these guys could also be on attack rear. I did have to add Chud Herdman to the Vanarushian side because these indie spearmen, they literally don't kill fucking anything. So this first line hits, and you already see a concave that is starting to form. And then the attack rears are starting to hit, where all these guys in the middle are piling up. And then these attack rears are coming in. Spells are starting to come in. Pausing it here, but you can see that if you overlay this, you can see that a lot of these squares in the mid, because they're in the mid-mosh, they have a lot of squares of dead space where nobody is attacking. Meanwhile, the thinner line, and you don't want to thin out your line too much because you don't want the enemy to just break through your mid. The thinner line, the troops on attack rear, they preserve their moves and they keep going. And they keep going towards the end, but they also appropriately lap around the flanks. And so you actually end up with a lot more combat frontage and a lot less dead square space. Basically, most of the Vanarushian side is doing something useful, either maneuver-wise or in terms of either maneuver-wise or combat, whereas a lot of the Phlegrin side is just fucking doing nothing. And that's that. But we'll go back in because it didn't really show you the effect of the spells. This time, I'm going to slow it down again and focus on what happens when our spellcasters start casting spells into the mid-mosh. Because this is, as I said, one reason why people tend to value evocations very highly, and crossbows very highly, more highly than I would, is because this Midmosh happens in a lot of games. So you see the Midmosh developing. There's the Vanarushians are spread out, whereas the Phlegrins, scripted deliberately poorly, are clumped up in this massive clump in the middle. And both sides start ending up firing evocations in. And these evocations, the fireballs, which are typically very bad from the Vanarushian side, are getting good hits with all their effects. Whereas the Phlegrin side, their sages, they get some good hits, but they get a lot of misses on more powerful evocations. And alright, you get some hits, you get Blade Wind, comes in, misses a bunch of misses, even though it's a more powerful evocation. Then you get a Fireball, huge hit, Falling Fires, hits both sides. Fireball, huge hit, because there's just so much more depth to the Phlegrin side that they can target the middle of this HP blob and scatter and still get good hits no matter what direction they scatter. Whereas the Phlegrin side, attempting to fire on the Vanarushian side with their evocations, has to target this narrow line, and they can scatter out back into a miss or into their own troops, which is just devastating. So you see, even though these Vanarushian mages are generally weaker, they're getting better hits. And, I mean, the Phlegrin mages, these guys who went around back, the Phlegrin mages a lot of times will, because they have higher prec on closer targets, are just going to target them and fucking do very little, you know, or just target a few fucking guys who went around the side with some big blast, while the Vanarushian sages, even though they are generally weaker, are just absolutely bombing the shit out of the Midmosh. So, you know, might have to run it back to see how much was just diverted by guys on the side. That's just how, another example of how this Midmosh is very bad, and you don't want to get stuck into it. And if you get your opponent stuck into it, and you go around the sides, generally the things you have to do are more effective. I mentioned that I don't think evocations are as powerful as other people do, and that's because I typically play and try to play with people who are actively attempting to avoid this circumstance where evocations are great. If we look at those Phlegrin evocations, they did some damage, but they didn't do that much damage. So let's look. The battle report. We have our sages doing 61 kills. The Trophobos on the other side, the Phlegrin sages, they were casting more powerful magic. They got more kills, 68, but some of those are going to be friendly fire, while the Vanarushian sages had virtually no friendly fire, maybe a little bit at the end. So you see this more powerful, larger force. The only thing the Vanarushian force had going for him is these herdmen here, which, you know, or more than, they're better than the Cyclops warriors, but larger force, more powerful mages, casting more powerful magics, loses because it was deliberately poorly scripted to go into the Midmosh. But that is how the Midmosh is and why you should avoid it.